Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I have the honor of introducing Dr. Wecker this evening, and as I'm sure we all know who he is, and we all have been here and heard his wisdom, and are, learning from all the things he's said. We know he was born in Saskatchewan, but I have a question for him. Um, which came first? Was it the Rough Riders from Saskatchewan or the Rough Riders from Ottawa? Do you know football?
Well, I know football, and I'm an avid Rough Rider fan.
Exactly. You can't come from Saskatchewan and not be a Rough Rider fan.
That is correct.
So who stole the Rough Rider name from who?
I think that's why the Red Blacks finally gave in.
Oh, we know that's not true. Now, we know that you're a traveler, and I too thought I was a traveler, but apparently I'm not. So, because of the number of countries you've gone to, I decided, I have to try and count and see how many countries I've visited. And I came up with 31. And I'm thinking, 31, that's pretty good. But that's nothing in comparison to 165. So, I mean, that's unbelievable. We know that you lived in Rwanda and Kenya and Ivory Coast, and I've always wanted to visit the Ivory Coast. I've heard a lot about the Ivory Coast. When I used to compete, I was a sprinter, and we used to compete against the Ivory Coast actually quite a few times, and they always had really amazing 4x1 relay teams, and they always seemed like just genuine people. But I've never had the opportunity to actually go there.
And they make the best pineapples in the world.
Pineapples? Oh, really?
Second largest exporter.
I don't know. In the world? I don't know. I'm from.
In the world.
I'll have to take your word for it. You've been to more countries than I have, so yeah.
I'll invite you to come and taste it. Hawaiian pineapple.
Yeah, you've probably tasted more pineapple than me, so I'll have to bow to that one. We know you are married with 4 kids, and it's an honor having you here, soaking in all the knowledge that you have given us. You're such a brilliant man and a man of God, and we feel very privileged that we are here learning from you with help from the Holy Spirit, of course. And with that, I present you Dr. Wecker.
When I worked at the Africa Indian Ocean Division, which now has been split up and it doesn't exist anymore, we had 33 countries in our division. So, and I managed to get to almost all of them. I had 2 that I had not visited, which was Mauritius and Comoros. But we had a big division, and so that gave me an opportunity to get to know the African continent extremely well. Tonight, we're going to be talking about our immune system. Many of the things that we're going to present tonight are going to be somewhat reviews and repetition to some of the other things that we've talked about, but I want to look at it specifically from our immune system. We depend on our immune system for a lot of activity. We depend on it for recognizing foreign invaders, viruses, bacteria, protozoa, fungi, and even cancer cells. I think my awareness of my immune system has been made much more acute because one of my patients who I've taken care of since she was a little girl, when she graduated from high school, developed a seizure disorder, which we were working with. And in the course of treating her seizure disorder, she developed an autoimmune liver disorder, went into liver failure, and ultimately had a liver transplant in London. which was now 8 years ago. And they've told her that if she makes it to 10 years post-transplant, she will probably end up having a normal lifespan. But being a liver transplant patient, she is on immune suppressant medications. And now Carrie has decided she wanted, when she had her brain surgery, she decided she wanted to be a nurse. So she went to nursing school and it now works in the neuro unit in Halifax. And I've had to work with her through the COVID time at protecting her from the virus, as well as, and we've actually had to put her off work for a period of time because her immune system is suppressed. She's done admirably well. And but working through this immune suppression with her, I've really come to appreciate the value of our immune systems. We all have varying levels of an immune system. There are some people who seem to catch disease very easy and very quickly, and there are other people who are far more resistant to disease. But in general, we're going to look at some of the factors for this immune system tonight. So this immune system is really quite remarkable. When I started medical school, we didn't know a lot about the immune system. I think our explosion in knowledge came in the 1980s with HIV and AIDS, with the human immunodeficiency virus. And with that, the research was extensive, and our knowledge of the immune system has become incredibly complex, to the point that even studying immunology now is like studying a foreign language. It's just so complicated. And then, of course, now we have our next challenge to our immune system, which has been COVID. And through this COVID epidemic, I've heard all sorts of people with their various and sundry ideas about immune systems and whether vaccines are needed or not, and how come vaccines were developed so quickly. Well, the reason why the vaccine was developed so quickly is because we have been working on a vaccine for malaria for quite some time. And we have been looking at these RNA viruses, or this RNA vaccines for malaria. We've not been successful yet at a vaccine for malaria, although there are clinical trials that are going on right now with humans, and hopefully within the next couple of years we will have a vaccine for malaria. But the technology for the vaccine was already in place. And so the moment the pandemic started, we just took the spike proteins off the COVID virus and incorporated them into the vaccine technology that was already available. And so that's the reason why the vaccines came out so quickly. And then, of course, the second reason was that the United States put a fair amount of funding into this transition into the mRNA vaccines. So once an antigen is recognized, then an immune response takes place. And this involves signaling between all sorts of different cells in the immune system. And there's cell-to-cell contact. There are chemicals which communicate back and forth between various cells and various aspects of the immune system. And then together, it's like an army of different factors that work together to combat the disease. We have multiple types of cells that are part of our immune system, and I'll list off some of them. We have macrophages, which are very big cells, macro meaning big and phage meaning eat. So they're big eaters, and they will engulf any sort of a bad cell, and they just dissolve it. It's an incredible thing to even watch. We have some other white blood cells, monocytes, neutrophils, eosinophils. We have, and then we have our immune system in our gut, which is a very, very big part of our immune system. So this entire army works to keep us healthy from invaders. The immune response frequently leads to inflammation, however. So if we have an immune response that's out of control, this inflammation can start attacking our own cells, our healthy cells, and we call that an autoimmune disease. So it can attack our joints for like rheumatoid arthritis. It can attack, as it did with Carrie, her liver in an autoimmune liver disorder. It can attack any of the cells in our body. So we need to keep our immune system under control so it's working in the appropriate way against cancer cells and all these other microbes that we are exposed to on a regular basis. Now, there is a certain amount of memory that goes into our immune system so that if we get an immune response to a particular pathogen, the body remembers it. Now, this has been a problem with COVID, as we're all aware, because it has evolved over 2 or 3 years. So many people have had COVID that this virus has mutated and changed, and therefore what was working for an immune response initially then suddenly is no longer working for that immune response. So that's why we've been having booster shots, and now coming this fall we're going to get a bivalent vaccine, and it may or may not be connected to the influenza vaccine for this year, but it's going to cover the Omicron variants as well as the other variants as well. So the basic foundation for our immune system are some of the same things that we have been talking about every night this past week. So we certainly have our dietary factors. Oops, I didn't want to go there. I want to go here. So if I am working during the cold season, when all the children are coming home from schools with colds and snotty noses, and if I have a piece of chocolate, I am virtually sure that I can get that cold from somebody. Now, I have found that if after having a piece of chocolate, I immediately brush my teeth, have a glass of water, rinse my mouth all out, it won't be as likely. The sugar in the chocolate actually weakens the mucosa of your respiratory tract so that the virus can attach. So it's just, and I'll give you some suggestions here shortly and what you can do to prevent some of those things from attaching, because there are factors that favorize an infection, and then there are factors that don't. So foods are one of them. Limit sugars. Sugars are definitely. If we give a person a high sugar meal, we can check and see how many bacteria these white blood cells can actually eat, the macrophages, how well they work. And the macrophage activity decreases down to 10% of what it was just after a high sugar meal. So that's one of the reasons why diabetics get infections easily. And so one of the things that I always advise parents of children who get infected, that they need to watch the sugar content. We have the other things: regular exercise, manage stress, sleep, good connections and relationships, stay hydrated, and we're going to go through some of these here in a minute. In the year 2000, well, first of all, my son had decided he was going to be a student missionary in Singapore. And so as he was leaving for Singapore, I told him, I said, well, Walj, before you come back from Singapore, I want you and me to go on a trip to China together. Okay, Dad. And the last thing his mother told him as he left was, don't you fall in love with an Asian girl. Well, the falling in love with the Asian girl took place very quickly. And so then I thought, oh, there goes my travel plans for China. And I thought, wait a minute. Lehan speaks 3 Chinese dialects. I have a translator with me. Well, no, when she decided to come too, my wife said, well, if Leon's coming, I'm coming. And then her parents were coming. So we had a team of 6 of us visiting China. We traveled by train, which was quite interesting. The first leg of the trip was from Hong Kong to Beijing. And those tickets are easy to buy in Hong Kong. When we got to Beijing, we had an ADRA director in Beijing who bought a ticket for us down to Xi'an, where the terracotta warriors are. But in Xi'an, we had to go buy our own tickets. Well, we ended up in a real predicament with those tickets there. So we managed to get 2 first-class tickets and 4 25th-class tickets. And a lot of negotiation took place on that trip. And finally, we ended up with 2 beds that we put 4 people in. And the 2 of us sat in the hallway for the rest of the night. And the train was hot. And every time I would open the window to get some cool air in there, the Chinese stewards and stewardesses would come and immediately close the window. And the reason why they did that was because the Chinese believe that there is something in the night air that brings disease. And so you can't let the night air in. We all have ideas of what causes disease and what doesn't. I was not terribly supportive of this idea of the Chinese because it was hot and I kept opening the windows and they kept talking to me in Chinese about keeping them closed. I think I did win that battle, though. So we want to learn what we can do to make our immune systems better. And there are things that work and there are things that don't work. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done. We are learning more and more about the interconnectedness of this immune response. And we are learning how to strengthen our immune system. So researchers are exploring the effects of diet, exercise, age, psychological stress, and other factors on immune response, and we're doing it both in animals and humans. We do know from just anecdotal evidence that if we are missing out on sleep, we're more likely to get sick. So getting adequate amounts of rest is one of the things that we do. I told you the story about the man who wore gloves on the cruise ship, and when I quizzed him, he said, well, he had not gotten sick ever since he started doing that. So we do know that touching things and then putting our hands in our eyes and nose and mouth is one of the factors for getting us sick and overwhelming our immune system. As we age, our immune response becomes reduced. And therefore, we get more infectious diseases and more cancers. But as life expectancy has increased in many of developing countries, we have also had an increase in age-related disease. While some people age in a healthy way, the conclusion of many studies, when we compare elderly people to younger people, is that the elderly are more likely to contract infectious diseases and even more importantly, to die from them. And that's why influenza, even our COVID-19 statistics, if we looked, I don't know if in Ontario you reported death rates per age group, but in New Brunswick it was reported every day for a while, and then it moved to every week. And if you looked, it was always the 90 plus, 80 to 90 group that had the largest numbers of deaths. And it really made the news when it was an under 30 or a 30 to 40-year-old who died because of COVID. Diseases like influenza, COVID-19, pneumonia are leading causes of death in people 65 plus. And so we want to find out why, and we want to reduce those numbers. Now, there does appear to be a connection between nutrition and immunity in the elderly. And one of the reasons is that there is a form of malnutrition which is very common even in our resource-rich countries, in the elderly, and it's micronutrient malnutrition. So my father, as he was 85 years old, we'd be traveling and we'd say, "Dad, we're going to go out to eat. Do you want to go out to eat?" No, he didn't want to spend the money, so he said. So we would go out to get a meal, and we'd come back, and there'd be a dozen donuts that had been purchased, and most of them had disappeared. So it was characteristic of what happens. Frequently, the elderly are alone, and therefore nobody likes to cook if they're just cooking for themselves. Their taste buds change, and so they need more salt, more sugar in order to get a good taste out of the food. And frequently, they tend to eat food that's easy to find and easy to prepare, that you can just go and grab. You don't have to prepare it. So the question we have is, should we be doing nutritional supplements for elderly people? And it's a question that we'll come to here in a few minutes. But these micronutrients, the colors that are found in our plants, are very, very important for our immune systems. These micronutrients are actually antioxidants. They are rust-preventing chemicals, and they prevent our cells from dying. So there is a process that takes place as we age and as we're exposed to various toxins, and our bodies produce a substance called free radicals. These are unstable molecules that can cause the destruction of our cells. And antioxidants mop these up. They get rid of them. So they protect our cells from aging and from rusting, and they keep us in better health and keep our immune system in health. So colorful fruits and vegetables are crucial to enhanced immune system. And these antioxidants mean that they are these anti-rust agents. So vegetables, including berries, and some of the most powerful antioxidants are found in wild blueberries and a variety of other berries as well. So as we look at our diet and what we need to do to boost our immune system, the first thing is we eliminate highly processed foods. There are calories in highly processed foods. There is frequently excess salt, excess sugar in highly processed foods, plus a lot of other chemicals which act as toxins. But we don't have any micronutrients in any of these. Zero. So we can get all the calories we need from these foods, but we're not going to get anything that protects our immune system. We do need to keep our healthy fats going, because they are required for our gut health, for our brain health, and for our immune system health. We need to emphasize whole, natural foods that are not processed, and once again, preferably organic if we have the option. If they are not organic, we need to wash them very thoroughly to get all the insecticides and herbicides off of them before we eat them. So there's the collection of the things. Look at the colors there, and the richness of micronutrients that collection of foods contain. Vitamin C is known to boost our immunity, and one study found that older adults who ate 1 kiwi every day for a month had a significant decrease in the severity and duration of upper respiratory infections compared to those who didn't. The kiwi is very rich in vitamin C. Orange juice may have some vitamin C in it, but it's also got a lot of sugar in it. So the combination of the sugar and the vitamin C probably counteract each other. One of the best foods for vitamin C are green and yellow and red peppers. It's probably the highest concentration of vitamin C in any food. So a collection of bell peppers of different colors are helpful too. It's better to get the vitamin C from the vegetables and fruits that we eat rather than taking vitamin C capsules. Now, the pharmaceutical industry would like to put everything into capsules and pills and get you to take them to support their industry. However, it presents a problem. For example, we do know that lycopene, it's a micronutrient found in tomatoes, especially in stewed tomatoes, and it is very effective in decreasing men's risks of developing prostate cancer. So the pharmaceutical industry wants to sell lycopene tablets or capsules to you, but we have never proven that lycopene by itself does anything at preventing prostate cancer. And the reason is that these micronutrients are in a combination with many other things, and it's the combination that works rather than just the one element. One day I was at one of my conferences, and we had an ethnobotanist who came to speak to us, who was from Harvard. And this guy was working down in the Amazon rainforest with the shaman of some of the traditional tribes down on the borders of Guyana and Brazil and Colombia and Brazil, that area. And on one particular time, a lady came to see the shaman with symptoms that looked like diabetes. And the shaman said, "Okay, I'll fix this up." And he disappeared into the forest for several days, and he came back with 2 plants he had found in the Amazon rainforest, and he gave them to this lady. The next time the researcher was down there, he asked the shaman how this lady was doing. And the shaman said, "Oh, you didn't notice her as we walked by those fields? She's out there cultivating her field." "Well, how are her symptoms related to her diabetes?" "Well, they're completely gone." He said, "Really?" So he went and found the lady and checked on her, and she had no trace of diabetes now. So he excitedly went home and told the pharmaceutical companies what this shaman had done and how he had found these 2 products that, given to this lady, had cured her diabetes. And the pharmaceutical company said, "Well, we want to find out what the one active ingredient was. So you ask him what the one active ingredient was." So the next time he went back, he asked the fellow, and the fellow said, "If one ingredient would have cured it, why would I have spent 5 days in the forest looking for 2? So many times these micronutrients work in combination with other micronutrients to provide the desired effect. And when we eat a stewed tomato, there may be 100 different micronutrients in that stewed tomato, of which lycopene is only one, and it's the combination of factors that gives the desired effect. So it's better if we get our vitamins and minerals from whole foods that have them, rather than just supplementing a vitamin tablet to try and replace it. There is a role for vitamin supplementation, and we will come to that. So the next aspect with our food is our healthy gut biome. Remember that 75% of our immune system is found in our gut. So therefore, we need to keep this biome, this collection of bacteria that live in our gut, healthy so that they work at boosting our immune system. So this is an area, as I said before, of intense and active research. Scientists are finding out that the microbiome plays a key role in our immune function. There's a lot of immune activity that goes in there, and the production of proteins that actually fight bacteria and viruses. The diet plays a large role in what kinds of microbes live in our intestines, as we learned. A high-fiber, plant-rich diet with plenty of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes supports the growth and maintenance of beneficial microbes. And certain of these microbes, these bacteria, break down fibers into short-chain fatty acids, which are shown to stimulate cell immunity activity. And sometimes these fibers are called prebiotics because they're the ones that feed the probiotics or the microbes. So a diet containing probiotics, which we get from the fermented foods that we talked about, we get from all the other sources of the bacteria, and the prebiotics, the 40 plant-based foods, together work at keeping a healthy immune system. So, our 40 different plant-based foods per week, which provide the basis for all the bacteria to grow and live on, plus the fiber that's in them, makes a healthy immune system. Now, one other thing that I need to mention this week, and I don't really have a good place to put it in, but I'm going to do it right now, and that is, back in the 1960s, when there was a sugar cane problem in the world, and the price of sugar had gone up. And the president at that time in the United States was Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon decided that he no longer wanted to import sugar cane from around the world, much to Barbados and Jamaica and those countries' great dismay. So he decided he was going to produce sugar in the United States, and he got it from corn. And so this became high fructose corn syrup or corn additives. So in the 1960s, this became the major sweetening for the food industry in the United States and Canada. And if you look at all the products on the shelves, you will find high fructose corn syrup, or sometimes they hide it now. They'll say corn solids, or they'll put another name for it. But fructose, which is found in fruit, but this high fructose corn syrup is not digested by the body in the same way that other sugars are. In fact, it's digested and retreated in the body the same way that alcohol is. The only difference is you don't get a buzz from eating the fructose, but you cause the same amount of problems in your body from it. So I have discovered recently that one of the major causes for gout is high fructose corn syrup, or fructose. And every time I do an ultrasound of people's livers now, I am finding what we call fatty degeneration of the liver. It's the second most common cause of liver failure after alcohol, and it is entirely caused by using fructose. Now, the fructose that we get from eating fresh fruit is not a problem because it's hooked to fiber. So these fibers that are in our fruit protect the fructose in the fruit from doing this damage to our bodies. So we need to try and eliminate fructose as much as we possibly can. So I've said we eliminate artificial sweeteners, we're to cut down on sugar, now we eliminate fructose, we're really getting restrictive. We're better off to have pure cane sugar than we are high fructose corn syrup. So this is becoming a problem, and probably 95% of the ultrasounds I do now show fatty degeneration of the liver. Also, have you noticed what has happened with our obesity epidemic in North America since the 1960s? You just go through in a public place, in a shopping center or a grocery store or an airport, and just look at people. And the size of people is really quite remarkable. But this fructose is one of the things that promotes weight gain. And it promotes bad weight gain. So it's a type that once you start it, you can't get rid of it. So if you're interested in seeing a very interesting exposition on fructose, there are a couple from the University of California. One is called, I think it's called Sugar, the Bitter Truth. And if you were to look on YouTube, you could find that. And the fellow who does the lecture does it in a way that non-medical people can understand it quite easily. So, fiber, very important, and it counteracts the fructose. I mentioned too some of our fermented foods that boost our gut bioflora. And of course, we have all our herbs and spices, which also boost our microflora in our guts. As I mentioned, our processed foods and high sugar content are things we need to avoid. So number 2 is adequate sleep. If we miss sleep, we are more likely to get sick. We should aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, and we should try to keep to a relatively constant sleep cycle. Waking and going to bed around the same time each day. This becomes a problem for people who do shift work, and I frequently see sleep problems in people who do shift work. And also, they have a tendency to gain more weight than those who don't do shift work, who have a regular rhythm to their work. So our body clock regulates the feelings of sleepfulness and wakefulness, and so having a regular sleep program gives us deeper and more restful sleep. So several people have asked me about how to facilitate good quality sleep or struggling with insomnia. And the list that I gave some of them the other night, but the list that I would have is number 1, cool down the bedroom a little bit. Have a cooler bedroom than the rest of the house. If you need a fan or something in there to cool it down, fine. Open the windows now that it's fall. Let the temperature in the bedroom cool down. Set the mood. Dim the lights at least 30 minutes before bedtime. Turn off extra noises. Don't work right up until the time you go to bed. This is one of my bad habits, and I will frequently be keeping on working and then finally say, oh, I need to go to bed. Fortunately, falling asleep is not a problem for me. My wife gets so angry because I'm frequently asleep before I get to the bed, and I don't even remember climbing in. Keep the room dark. Avoid lights, LED lights, clock lights, phone lights, etc. And as I mentioned before, TVs, computers, mobile phones, don't put them in the bedroom. Essential oils, and we're going to talk a little bit more about essential oils here in a little bit, but essential oils can help improve the quality of our sleep, and there are 3 of them that are helpful, but one is lavender oil, and so it seems to induce a better sleep quality. And sometimes they have these little essential oil infusers, and you can always put one in your room with a little bit of lavender oil in it. I already mentioned unwind your mind. Don't work right up till bedtime. Maintain the regular sleep schedule. We've talked about that. Avoid caffeine. If you have problems with sleeping, 0 caffeine. There are some people who can manage to have some coffee or tea in the morning, and then it doesn't bother their sleep. Other people, 1 cup, and they will not sleep that night. My wife will occasionally want just a little bit of something with caffeine in it, but she struggles with sleep, and she just cannot handle it at all. So if you're having problems with sleep, no caffeine. We talked the other night about physical exercise earlier in the day, so exercise in the morning rather than in the evening. Another thing that's helpful is to journal before going to bed. Just review the day, and I think it's a good time to just be thankful for what's taken place in the day, to spend a little bit of time and just thanking God for what's taken place in the day and for another day of life. And that puts our minds peaceful and at rest. Magnesium supplementation is very helpful with sleep. And so there are several ways in which we can use magnesium supplementation. We can use magnesium supplements. We talked about them the other night, not magnesium citrate, but magnesium gluconate. We can also use a nice bath, and we soak in magnesium salts, Epsom salts, or magnesium flakes before we go to bed. We can use the magnesium oil, and we can put some of that on our body. But those do help us relax. They do help the muscles to relax, and they do facilitate sleep. Magnesium is also good for our arthritis, and I think magnesium supplementation is more important than calcium supplementation for our bones. We have too much calcium, and we don't use that calcium well if we don't have the magnesium on board. So some magnesium can be helpful. Avoid and limit naps during the day if you're having problems sleeping. So try and just keep awake during the daytime, and then when it's bedtime, go to bed. And another thing is check your medications, because many times there can be medications that disturb sleep as well. One other thing that I'm going to mention to you, and here on this slide, I'll go over it here first. So we got no heavy food before we eat, no lights like I talked about, cell phones and various things in the room, no alcohol, no smoking, no caffeine, no hard training, and try and de-stress before we go to bed. The yeses are get up at the same time, go to bed at the same time. If you're going to get some exercise in the evening, it should be a relaxing walk, not a workout. Make sure the bed is comfortable, cool, dark room, bedtime routine, and a relaxing bath with magnesium are the things on that slide. This is called an Aura ring. And this ring, you can buy them, you can order them on Amazon, and it will monitor the quality of sleep that you're having. And you'll have to, it's plugged into your telephone or a computer, a tablet or something like that in the morning. And so my daughter just gave one to my wife a couple of weeks ago when we were visiting our daughter. And she's been using it at night, and she's been learning all sorts of information about her sleep patterns and what is affecting her sleep and how many hours she has in quality sleep, what her breathing rate is when she's sleeping. So she is learning from it. It's giving feedback on her sleep and the sleep issues that she has. So remember I told you about the Freestyle Libre for blood sugar monitoring. This is a monitoring factor that will be helpful in people who are not sleeping well. And I put it as O-U-R-A. I thought it was A-U-R-A, but I believe it's O-U-R-A. And you just put it on your finger, and it monitors a whole variety of sleep information. So it's something that can be helpful. We also have some other types of therapy that we can do for people with chronic insomnia called cognitive behavioral therapy. And we have special people who will work with those who have trouble sleeping and helping them to sleep better and more restfully without taking medications. And some of this involves helping our mind to adjust to sleep, because if we think we're not sleeping well, then our mind kicks in and then it sort of stops us from sleeping well. We start fretting that we're not going to sleep well. And then it's a negative factor for you. sitting on the 401 the day before yesterday, I suddenly realized that I was going to have to urinate. And I thought, oh my, what am I going to do on the 401 in a traffic jam? And but the more I thought about it, the faster my bladder was filling up until I was getting quite concerned. So I had to get my mind off of it so that I could get to the next en route station. And go. So if you're not sleeping and you think, oh, I'm not going to sleep, I'm not going to sleep, I'm not going to sleep, then it just snowballs into the fact that you don't sleep. It keeps you awake. So they help with relaxation techniques. It helps with avoiding daytime naps, and so that you can get back into a sleep cycle. And there's frequently, sometimes they can do light therapy. So these are all parts of therapy that we work on for insomnia. Okay, so adequate sleep. The next thing is decreased sugars. Sugar poisons our immune system. When your immune system is compromised, you are likely to get sick. If you eat a lot of foods and beverages high in sugar, refined carbohydrates, which your body processes as sugar, you will reduce your ability to fight off disease. There's no doubt that limiting how much added sugar you consume promotes overall health. Foods that significantly raise your blood sugar, such as those with high added sugars, increase the production of inflammatory proteins, such as tumor necrosis alpha, C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and these all negatively affect our immune system. So we got some fairly good research on that. Especially important for people with diabetes, because an elevated blood sugar for a long period of time decreases the effectiveness of the immune system. What's more, I mentioned about how high blood sugar poisons our cells that eat bacteria and viruses, so it decreases their functioning. High sugar levels harm our gut bioflora and drive the gut bacterial imbalances, and we become more susceptible for infections that way. In 2012, they studied 562 older adults who had elevated blood sugar levels and lower immune responses and higher levels of an inflammatory marker called the C-reactive protein. And so they found that these all contributed to a decreased immune system. Diets high in added sugar increase our susceptibility to autoimmune diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Reiter's syndrome, and the list goes on with those. So limit our sugar intake as best as we can. Our regular exercise is another one that is very beneficial, and you've got a whole variety of exercises, both aerobic exercise and resistance exercise, and they help our immune system. The physical activity flushes bacteria out of the lungs and airways, reduces our chances of getting colds, flus, and other illnesses. Exercise changes our antibodies in our white blood cells, and it makes the white blood cells to circulate more rapidly so that they can detect illnesses earlier. There is a brief rise in body temperature during and right after exercise, and that also plays a role in preventing bacteria from growing. And this slight temperature rise from exercise helps the body fight infections better, the same way that a fever will help you break an infection. Studies have shown that people who follow a moderately energetic lifestyle benefit the most from starting and sticking to an exercise program. So someone asked the question and said, what do you do? How do you get started with exercise? Do you know what the biggest limitation to exercise is for me? It's putting my shoes on or my coat in the wintertime. Once I can get my shoes on and my coat on and get out the door, I enjoy it. It makes me feel good, but it's just getting started. So we use the Nike motto in our household: just do it. So Alberta will come and say, you want to go for a walk? No, I don't particularly want to go for a walk. Why not? Well, I'm busy right now. Just do it. And that usually works. And we encourage each other with the Nike phrase to just get out the door. Once you're out the door and you're walking and you're in the fresh air, we all feel better. And it's getting that motivation to get started with it. And especially in the winter when you got to put on coats and hats and, mitts and gloves and boots and everything in the wintertime. The wind is blowing and you think, oh, I'd just rather sit inside the house here. So set a sort of a target time for yourself. And then remember that it's like doing any job that you really don't want to do, that you want to procrastinate about. Just do it. Be done with it. So exercise will definitely boost our immune system. Stay hydrated. And we each have different capacities for hydration. I don't sweat particularly much, and therefore I only get thirsty 3 times a year. And but my wife is always drinking water, and she's always thirsty. And so when she gets a little tickle in her throat, she starts pouring the water in to flush out the infectious components with it. And there is no doubt that increasing your water intake protects us from disease. I think that there are several factors with it, but one of the factors is that this water intake cleans even the lining of our throat as we swallow, and that's where many of the infections take place. So like I told you, I have a piece of chocolate, and when do chocolates get delivered at my office? Just before Christmas, right? And just before Christmas, every kid in the entire community is coming in with colds and coughs. So I get the combination of colds and coughs and boxes of chocolates that are hard to resist. And it's a guarantee of being sick for Christmas. So if I do imbibe, I will have my chocolate, I'll quickly go and brush my teeth and have a glass of water, and that will be helpful. Now, one other thing, that if you start getting a sore throat, if you take a zinc and vitamin C lozenge and just sort of let that lozenge dissolve in your mouth, you'll be amazed at how that'll prevent a sore throat from developing. My last strep throat was in 1977. And I remember it very well. I was in my residency, and I had to go to the emergency room with a terrible strep throat. But I have never had a sore throat since 1977. And the minute there's that slight, when you swallow and you say, uh-oh, it's starting, have the vitamin C zinc lozenge. Now, one word of advice, you don't take zinc on an empty stomach, or you will be nauseated, okay? So make sure you have some food on your stomach. Doesn't have to be much, but something. And then take the vitamin C zinc, and you'll be amazed how well that will work, okay? When COVID started, our pharmacy was sold out, and they couldn't even get supplies of them from everybody who was taking it to prevent viruses. So staying well hydrated is also important for detox pathways, increased lymph drainage, making sure that we clean out foreign invaders, waste materials. Dehydration contributes to muscle tension, headaches, low serotonin production, digestive issues. And the one other thing that I'll mention that I'm sure some of you struggle with are leg cramps at night. 2 things that you can take for preventing leg cramps are keep your fluid intake up and supplement magnesium. So those are 2 big things for leg cramps. The next one I want to talk about is essential oils. During the bubonic plague in the UK in the 1600s, there were a series of grave robbers who would come in. And, when you had bubonic plague in your house, you had to put a sign on the front of the house, Now everybody's complained about social isolation and wearing masks and, avoiding people with COVID, but it's not new. It goes back to leprosy in Bible times, and certainly during the plague. But these grave robbers would all go into the houses where people died of bubonic plague and empty out the houses, rob the houses. And they never got sick. And finally, somebody wondered why they didn't get sick and how they could go into the house with plague to steal and not get sick. And so they found out that they were using a combination of essential oils. And we now call it thieves' oil. And so we can buy thieves' oil. Thieves' oil is a combination of essential oils, basically cinnamon, clove, eucalyptus, lemon, and rosemary. And so I'll put that on with essential oils there, and then I'll put this one on. There's the grave robber right there, okay? And so they covered their mouth and nose and everything with a mask soaked in this oil, and they never got sick. Now, we have found that this is a very effective antibiotic, and there are companies now that sell thieves' oil. In fact, we are using thieves' oil as a cleaner in the bathroom and other things. It comes in a little spray bottle, and there's no poisonous chemicals in it. It's just essential oils. So not only does it clean the bathtub and the toilet bowl and the sink very well, but of course it adds to a very delightful smell of the thieves' oil. So thieves' oil is one of them, and all of these that I have mentioned are beneficial to our immune system. Eucalyptus oil increases the activity of some of our immune cells, also appears to reduce the levels of inflammatory cytokines produced by these cells. Oil of cloves is also a very powerful anti-infectant thing. I'll tell you another story, and if you get tired of all my stories, just tell me to stop. But I was heading out to the Eastern Congo on a trip, and my next door neighbor, who was kind of a questionable guy. I liked the guy, but he would never tell me what he did. And I knew he worked for the CIA, basically. He was a major CIA agent. And so one day he said to me, when's your next trip coming? And I said, I'm going to I'm traveling on Sunday. He said, well, could I get the U.S. Embassy vehicle to take you to the airport with me? I said, sure. So the embassy vehicle came by. And so I said, well, where are you going on this trip? Well, he told me a few countries where he was going. And I said, he said, where are you going? I'm going to the Congo. At that time, Zaire. And he said, well, I'm going there too. I said, well, what part of the country? He said, I'm going to be in Kinshasa, the capital. I said, why don't you come to Eastern Zaire? It's the best part of the country. I said, if you come to the city of Goma by Sunday morning, you can come with me and I'll show you the best part of the country. Sunday morning came, he didn't show up. So we headed on up. I was visiting health centers up the Eastern Congo, and we got up to this little village. I was in the clinic. The clinic nurse invited me to his home for supper. I'm sitting in his home, and there's a knock on the door. And I hear Philip's voice saying, is Dr. Wecker here? I said, how in the wide world did you find me? He said, finding a white face in Eastern Congo is not a difficult job. Well, the next day, he woke up with a toothache. Serious toothache. So we stopped at the home of Bob Roberts, who was a pilot who flew mission planes for us, and his wife was a nurse. And Bob, he had an uncle who was a dentist at Loma Linda. So every time Bob was home, he would take a course in dentistry from this uncle of his. So we took Philip out to this clinic. He had a dental chair and everything. He had a broken filling. We took out this filling, and there's a great big gaping hole in the tooth. And Bob says to me, well, what do we do next? I said, I don't know. I'm not a dentist. He said, well, I'll tell you what. Go in the house, radio contact to Lubumbashi. We have a Canadian dentist there, Dr. Ford, and he get him on the phone, and he will tell us what we're supposed to do. So I did. And Dr. Ford said, put in some oil of cloves and put in a temporary filling, and that will hold him till he can get to a regular dental clinic to have a proper filling put in. Oil of clove. We put it in. Philip had never been particularly supportive of mission people in his life, but boy, with that toothache cured, he had a changed story for us. And he flew out and continued on his CIA journey in other parts of the country, but he will never forget having his dental care done by a pilot and a physician who took care of him in the middle of eastern Congo. So oil of cloves. I just recently was talking to a lady as I was buying a fluoride-free toothpaste to help with this neuralgia that I'd had. And she says, yes, she says, I was supposed to have a root canal, and I started using oil of cloves, and my tooth problem cleared up. The dentist said I no longer need a root canal, and she did it just by using oil of cloves. Lavender oil, I already mentioned that. Tea tree oil is another one that decreases inflammation and boosts our immune system. Okay, the other thing is managing stress. Easier said than done, but we need to find healthy strategies that work well for us in our lifestyle, whether it's relaxing exercise, meditation, a particular hobby, talking to a trusted friend. Another tip is to practice regular conscious breathing throughout the day when feelings of stress arrive. And it doesn't have to be long. When I did a course in relaxation response therapy, the guy from Harvard, who was just a tremendous lecturer, he would just say, if you're in a business meeting and the stress levels start to do up, you just do a mini, he called it. You don't even have to close your eyes. You just start slowing your breathing down, timing your inspiration and your expiration, and you take 5 or 10 breaths like that, and your stress levels will quiet down. And so he got us all practicing some of these techniques, and they work. So some mindful breathing exercises will be helpful. Stress management, here's some suggestions. There are therapies, music, time management improvement, being out in nature, some yoga exercises, hobbies, exercise, a spa, many different things that can help us manage stress. And lastly, we eliminate our toxins. These toxins that we're exposed to are just powerful damagers of our immune system. For people who smoke, they need to stop smoking. People who consume alcohol, they should reduce or avoid alcohol altogether. Cannabis should be avoided. Other toxins are cleaning fluids, petroleum products, exhaust fumes. All of them they're solvents, and they destroy our whole immune system, and we need to avoid them as much as possible. Pesticides, herbicides, powerful destroyers of our immune system. Plastic food containers. We absorb things from those plastic containers, so we should be switching to glass containers as much as possible instead of plastic containers. I'm concerned about even plastic water bottles that people are using. There's chemicals that leach into the water from the plastic water bottles. Avoid insecticides at home. Much of the lead in the world is transported by the air from China and India, and it's disposed in our countries, drops in our rainfall. We want to detox. These are our cruciferous vegetables, and they are powerful detox agents, and they will absorb and bind many of the toxins. If we want to do a detox, we should be fasting somewhat, a modified fast for a couple of days. We could do some juicing while we're doing that fast, and then we focus in on the cruciferous vegetables and increase our water intake. and that helps get rid of many of these toxins. Any questions about our immune system? I think if we put some of these things, and like I said, they're a little bit repetitious now, but these are the ones that keep us healthy, keep our immune system healthy, keep our gut bioflora healthy. And if we put these into practice, we will feel better and do better. Okay, on our part 2, I'm going to do something a little bit different here in part 2 tonight. So I'll start out with a story, and that is, with my history of travel, I'm sure you know that I love maps. And as I was heading home the other day, I drove on Wellington Street and saw my favorite map store here in Ottawa, but it was closed when I went by, so I couldn't get in there and get it. When I was 10 years old, my grandmother gave me a globe for a Christmas present. And I would spend hours with that globe, looking at it, looking at all the countries on the world. And my best friend and I, we would spin the globe and we'd put our fingers on it to see where it landed. And then we would get out the encyclopedia and read about that country, because, of course, in that day there was no internet. And we'd dream of visiting these places together. Well, Wayne died in 1982, I guess, at the age of 29 years of age. I don't think he had ever left the province of Saskatchewan. When I got the news, I was in the country of Burundi, which was one of the countries that we had had our fingers land on years before and had dreamed of visiting. Many kinds of maps. There are atlases, road maps, topographical maps, hydrological maps, political maps. Now we have Google Maps. If we want to go somewhere, it's a good idea to have a map, even if you have GPS, Randy, because occasionally the GPS doesn't work and you need to have a paper map to back you up, okay? Oh, how does that say about my age? When I lived in northern Saskatchewan, I worked in Lac La Ronge here. And Lac La Ronge is an interesting lake because the southern part of this lake, you can see, are no islands. And it falls into the prairie zone. The northern part of the lake is in the Precambrian shield zone, like northern Ontario, Sudbury and northern places like that. So the lake is filled with islands, hundreds of islands. And it's also filled with rocky outcrops just underneath the surface of the water, sometimes only that far underneath the surface. So it looks like you're on the lake when you get up there, but there are reefs and shallow spots, and it's treacherous. And so when you go on that part of the lake, you basically have to have a map. You have to know where these reefs are, and you have to be able to just really go around all these reefs safely. And so a map is very helpful. Most visitors who come to Lac La Ronge to go fishing will hire a Cree guide. And these guides know where all the reefs are. They know the lake well. And so while I was there, I got some of the guides to teach me where to go on the lake. And so as I would take my boat out, I a few times had my heart in my mouth because the water was only this deep right in front of me, and I could take out the bottom of my motor. One day, a group of tourists arrived with a very large boat. I won't tell you what country they were from, powered by 2 big 150 inboard motors, and they didn't need a map. They didn't need a guide. They told us that they had been boating in Minnesota for a long, long time, and they knew exactly how to boat, and they didn't need any advice. So they took out from the dock and opened up those 150 horsepower inboard motors, and they went about 1 kilometer until they took the entire bottom off their boat. Those of us in shore just watched and shook our head as we saw disaster coming down the way. So maps are important if we want to safely reach our destination. They're important. They're a means to an end, though. They're not an end in itself. And so my childhood friend Wayne spent hours with me spinning the globe and dreaming of travel, but he never actually went anywhere. And that makes all the difference. Some people dream of going on a retirement trip, and then retirement comes and they never get to go anywhere. Maps only show their potential if one uses them to travel. They're a means to an end, a means to a destination. So if I want to go to Vancouver, I will get out a map and I will look at the route that I'm going to take to get to Vancouver. And if I use it, I will hopefully get to my destination. Sometimes maps can be erroneous or incomplete. I remember buying a map book in South Africa and found that it didn't have half the roads on it. And so therefore it was not a great amount of help to me. A map is only as good as it's accurate and complete. Another time well, there's the boat that, well, it's one of the boats that we headed out on the lake, okay? You get this map. Is it going to be terribly helpful for you in finding your way through Tokyo? Probably not, okay? And that's another long story of getting out of Tokyo. Or you go to some countries with another alphabet, a Cyrillic alphabet or an Arabic alphabet, and I don't have Randy with me, and I'm in serious trouble. Fortunately, in Egypt, they put it in both English languages and Arabic, so it helps. But you need to be able to use the map. If a map is erroneous, one may follow it carefully, but as long as the map has errors in it, one can never depend to get to one's destination, and one may have to stop and ask for directions. And yes, ladies, men occasionally do that. But sometimes we also need a guide. When I go to hike in Baxter State Park, I may have a map book. But one of the things that will help me when I'm hiking in the park is the trees are blazed along the trail. So that helps me find my way on the trail. But at other times, when there's not good blazes on a trail, we may need a guide to show us the way and to help us get to where we're going. So what about life's destinations? Where are we going with our lives? What do we want from life? How do we go about getting there? Do we even know where we're going? Do each of us have a destination in life? And I just shared with some of you that Randy and I just spent a few minutes with a friend, a young man who is struggling in life, and we've encouraged him to start thinking about a destination in his life. Where does he want his life to go? It's an overwhelming idea for him, but we're trying to help him step by step choose some goals, and then we will facilitate with him achieving those goals and going in that direction. Are we content with living our lives as just exiles in a distant land, or do we long to be where we were meant to be? Do we long to do what we were meant to do? Do we long for the abundant life that Jesus promised each one of us? Do we long for the kingdom of heaven? Do we pursue excellence? Do we intently desire an intimate relationship with God, or are we content just to relax our way in the desert and never get anywhere? Are we content with the scraps that life seems to throw us? Is the abundant life only a dream? And maybe we hope to get there when we retire or when we get to heaven. Where are we going with our lives? Have you ever thought about your life's destination? If not, you'll probably never do more than ride and drift along on the tides of life, tossed by every wave and current that comes along. And life can be meaningless and chaotic, as it is with this young man that we were just spending time with this afternoon. But God has offered us an abundant life. A life filled with happiness, with meaningful relationships, with love, with intimacy. A life that makes a difference to those around us. And this life is not just something that we have to wait for until we get to the hereafter. It can begin right now. But in order to get to life's destination, we need a map and we need a guide. And this is what we've been discussing this week. A guide to a healthier brain and a healthier life. A guide to a more abundant life. More healthy relationships. I've been sharing some of this information with you, but information alone will never lead to an abundant life because information is only a map. We need to start on a journey. As I said, having good roadmaps is not a bad thing. In fact, if one's going to need to travel, one needs a good roadmap. And the more dangerous the travel, the more important it becomes to have a good map. So crossing Lac La Ronge by boat was a very dangerous trip if you didn't have an accurate map. A few meters to the left or right would ruin your motor on a shallow reef. Close attention to an accurate map was crucial if you didn't know the lake well. But the journey to an abundant life is a dangerous journey as well. There are pitfalls on either side. There are reefs just under the water. We need good health information. But, and every time I say that word, I think about the Rwandese word, ariko. But, we need to start on a journey. So what are we going to do? Mere learning and thinking about a healthy, abundant life will not give us one. We all need to take the information that we're learning, we need to put it into practice and start living a life based on service for other people. We need to start taking our eyes off ourselves and begin a journey towards this abundant life that Jesus has promised. There's a hymn in the hymn book which I have learned to love. It's probably become my favorite hymn in our hymn book. It's not well known. It's called Let Your Heart Be Broken. And I'm going to tell you what the words are, and I just want you to meditate on the power of their meaning. Let your heart be broken for a world in need. Feed the mouths that hunger. Soothe the wounds that bleed. Give a cup of water and a loaf of bread. Be the hands of Jesus, serving in his stead. Here on earth applying principles of love, visible expression, God still rules above, living illustration of the living word to the minds of all who've never seen nor heard. Blessed to be a blessing, privileged to care, challenged by the need apparent everywhere. Where mankind is wanting, fill the vacant place. Be the means through which the Lord reveals his grace. Add to your believing deeds that prove it true. Knowing Christ as Savior, make him master too. Follow in his footsteps. Go where he has trod. In the world's great trouble, risk yourself for God. Let your heart be tender and your vision clear. See mankind as God sees. Serve him far and near. Let your heart be broken by a brother's pain. Share your rich resources. Give and give again. The journey is not always easy, but the journey is one that leads to an abundant life. But we need to start on that journey. We've now talked this week about principles for living healthfully. I want to encourage each of you to put some of them, many of them, into practice as you go forward into this coming year. We learn some principles about transitioning from a brain based on fear to one based on love. Let's start the journey and put these things into practice. And as we go through this guide that we've been giving you to health and wellness, remember that we do have another guide that has been promised to help us as we go on this journey. This type of living is not coasting on the tides and currents of life. It requires careful navigation. It requires maps of all kinds, accurate maps, complete maps. This type of living is dangerous territory. It's where God's calling each one of us, every one of us, to go. And believe it or not, but he has a mission that's specific to each one of us. Specific place, specific people that we need to meet, that he's putting in our path, so that not only do we get an abundant life by helping them, but they too get an abundant life. Dangerous territory? Yes. Can we travel without a map? Not safely. Can we travel without a guide? Never. Information is an excellent map, but in dangerous territory, maps are not enough. We need a guide, and God has promised us that guide. John 15:26. The Helper will come, the Spirit who reveals the truth about God and who comes from the Father. I will send him to you from the Father, and he will guide you. And so the abundant life, I love this picture. The thief comes not but for to steal and to kill and destroy. But I come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. And that's my goal, my wish, and my prayer for each one of us. The mission that God has called you and me on is of such vital importance to the kingdom of heaven that God himself will direct us on that path. He speaks to us when we stand before him in silence. He will give us direction. He will guide us on life's journey, provided that we have a destination and provided that we have some accurate maps. If our goal is the abundant life that Jesus has promised to the citizens of his kingdom, if our goal is a life of peace, intimacy, happiness, love, friendship, and service for those of our family who are in dire need, God will enable us to reach our goal. The information we're presenting this week serves as a map and a guide in our pursuit of excellence, in our pursuit of the abundant life. God will guide us through his Spirit. He will speak to us moment by moment as we journey, but we must be traveling. We must have a destination. Information alone is never enough. So I challenge you, are each of you traveling? You have a desire for an abundant life. Are you willing to head out into enemy territory and live a life of service for the most vulnerable in this world? Are you willing to subdue your fears under the control of a spirit-led prefrontal cortex? Are you willing to risk yourself for God in this world's great troubles? We now have some maps. It's time to get traveling. Traveling on a mission for God. Traveling to find an abundant life. Traveling through enemy territory. Traveling home. May God bless each of you this evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, and we'll continue our last day. I'm going to miss you guys one more day, so we'll have a good one tomorrow.